Russia's gunpowder factories are exploding in Putin's face. Sanctions? Drones? Sabotage? Moscow does not want these questions asked. But Russia's own factories are responding with fireballs. August 15th, Ryazan. Not far from the city center, a fire and a series of explosions lit up the sky in orange. Within seconds, production blocks collapsed, a dozen people were killed, and more than 130 workers and officials were taken to hospitals. The flames that spread around did not just burn the walls. They showed all of Russia which pillars of the war economy were made of wood. This was not a victory video shared by a Ukrainian drone, neither a long-range missile nor a sabotage team's cinematic operation. It was not Western sanctions either. It was the implosion of Russia's war economy from within. The Kremlin declared a day of mourning. Flags were lowered to half-mast. But the ritual of mourning couldn't cover all the tears in the black shroud draped over the state. So if it wasn't an enemy attack, how could it have been so easy? The answer is simple: either a technical malfunction, human error, or sabotage from within. All three possibilities lead to the same conclusion for the Kremlin: a vacuum of authority. Because for 3 years, the frequency of accidents in Russian industry, particularly in the production of explosives and propellants, has far exceeded normal deviation, even the range that could be explained by chance. The phrase, "it was an accident," no longer sounds like consolation, but like an admission. If you say sabotage, that opens another door to a nightmare. It means someone infiltrated the system. It means the regime of fear cannot silence even its own factories. Both narratives boil down to the same thing for Putin: a vivid image of the loss of authority. Don't think Ryazan is an inexperienced facility. This story is not new. In 2021, there was another explosion at the same place, and 17 people were killed. At that time, there was no war, and the country was normal. 4 years later, under the shadow of war, a much larger fire broke out, and this time its impact was not limited to a single city. We cannot call this a coincidence. The same facility, the same types of mistakes, the same corners cut. The difference is that this time, everything happened at the moment when the war machine needed ammunition the most. This is not a twist of fate, but a flaw in the system. Let's broaden the scene. It's not just Ryazan. Throughout August, explosions and fires occurred in Lipetsk, Taganrog, Voronezh, and Stavropol. In some cases, there were strong suspicions of drones. In others, there was no clear information. When you draw a line, what you see is this: industrial decay and Ukraine's deep strikes are working simultaneously. On one side, there is a production machine grinding along with outdated equipment, inexperienced shifts, and shortages of spare parts and safety gear. On the other, a drone program targeting the lifelines of that machine, electric substations or fuel depots, that can reach right into its core. When these two pressures converge, explosions cease to be accidents and become a pattern. Here we must pause and state the following. The explosion in Ryazan carries greater significance than the sound of cannon fire heard in the trenches. Because gunpowder is not merely a product, it is the heart of bullets, rockets, air, and artillery shells. Such facilities function as the lungs of the Russian war economy. They draw in and expel, setting the rhythm. If the lungs burn, the body cannot run. The rhythm of the front slows down, the noise decreases, the fire does not stop, but the inhalation narrows. In the language of war, the rate of fire, resupply, and reloading cycles begin to falter. How much? Only the charts in the Kremlin's hands can provide a clear answer to this question. But it is clear that the damage caused by the fire cannot be repaired in a day, and the loss of human life and equipment will create a void that will stretch over weeks and months. If you ask, if it's not drones, where does this explosion fit in? We can summarize the answer in 3 headings. First, haste. Second, the disruptive impact of sanctions. Third, a personnel crisis. Let's start with haste. As the war drags on, the demand for more translates into one thing on the production floor: shortening the timeline. Shift numbers increase, malfunctions are managed rather than stopped, maintenance intervals are postponed, and for now, let it be is said for a valve, sensor, or seal that cannot be replaced. The cost of saying, let it be for now, when it comes to explosive and propulsive chemicals, is high. Most of the time, it doesn't blow up on the first day but on the 3rd month. That 3rd month was August in Ryazan. Sanctions are no fairy tale. When they hit the ground, the realities of the workshops right over that fairy tale. The sensitive measurement equipment required for safety, Systems that discharge static electricity, modules that control thermal balance, quality control sensors, these are either harder to find or are being replaced with inferior alternatives. If a single component doesn't work as it should, it's not just an additional possibility in explosive production, it's the risk itself. Supply constraints, semi-official workarounds, a broken chain of oversight, at some point, everything comes down to making do. The lifespan of makeshift solutions is short, but the cost is long-lasting. The personnel crisis is the most human, most naked, and most painful part of the whole scheme. Hundreds of thousands of young men were either sent to the front, killed, or fled the country. The remaining workforce aged, grew tired, and was exposed to greater risks with lower skills. The security culture you speak of is not something that can be written in a day. It is the sum of habits passed down from master to apprentice. If you have no master, you have no culture. If you have no culture, procedures remain on paper. When procedures remain on paper on the production line, it means that no one can stop the fire once it decides to start. This is exactly what happened in Ryazan. So why should we take the possibility of sabotage seriously? Because wars are not only fought on the battlefield, they are fought within. A regime ruled by fear and mistrust will spew forth from within. One group opposes the war for ideological reasons and strikes a spark. Another seeks revenge. Yet another wants to create chaos. They aim to purge the regime. These are not theoretical scenarios. They are at least as real as technical malfunctions when a state's information flow is closed and its oversight is arbitrary. Which would you accept? If you call it a malfunction, you admit that meritocracy and order have collapsed. If you call it sabotage, you admit that your security apparatus is riddled with holes. For the Kremlin, both statements hit the same nerve. Putin's rule does not apply in either case. You see why it does not apply not only on the factory walls, but also in the lives of those who live outside those walls. Every exploding factory speaks not through the number of people inside, but through the hundreds, thousands of families in the surrounding area. Workers say, "I wasn't on that shift. It was supposed to be my turn tomorrow." Spouses say, "My husband was called in for overtime for the third time. This time he didn't come back." Neighbors say, "That place used to produce fiber. Now it smells like gunpowder." The state tries to frame the losses as heroism, but when a white-collar worker thinks, "I have to go back to that shift tomorrow," the propaganda breaks down. The please equation of workplace safety ends, and it becomes now or never. This feeling is not a momentary anger, it is a permanent survival reflex. Bad news for the Kremlin. The survival reflex is not as easy to manage as the fear reflex. The fact that the facility in Ryazan was processing not only gunpowder but also explosives separated from disarmed ammunition reveals another side of the story. On the one hand, old bombs are being removed from the front lines and taken out of storage. On the other hand, the goal is to make the materials extracted from them usable again. This is a difficult engineering process and an even more difficult security process. You can control every step on paper, but in practice, every step depends on the discipline of that facility, the experience of that shift, the temperature of that day, and the panic factor of that moment. There is one more invisible thing. The phrase, "Let's do it this way, we've done it this way before." That phrase often saves lives, sometimes it kills. The Kremlin's political reflex is familiar. Flags at half-mast, dramatic videos on television, and the cliché, "The relevant authorities have launched an investigation," repeated for several days. The following week, the same story plays out in another factory, another city. A stone is being crushed under your feet, and you ask, "Doesn't anyone see this?" They don't want to see it, because if they see it, they will have to speak up. If they speak up, they will pay the price. In Russia these days, the price is not a profession, but a future. What is the impact of these explosions on the front lines? Those who say, bullet production, ammunition, capsules, rocket engines, are right. But the real critical difference is time. When the daily firing plan of an artillery battalion is disrupted due to a delayed shipment at the factory, the unit digging trenches at that moment remains defenseless for 36 hours. When an anti-aircraft battalion deployed around an airport is rendered useless due to faulty gunpowder, the debris falling on a civilian station is called fate. Time is a more powerful concept than the caliber of a weapon. The smoke from Ryazan not only obscured today, but also weakened the sound of cannon fire 2 months later. If you ask, what does the man inside feel while all this is happening? Look for the answer on both sides of the table. The factory worker sees that the line where risk can no longer be balanced by wages has been crossed. He wants more money, more equipment, and more right to stop work. The manager, crushed under the pressure of the delivery deadline, silences the safety officers, reviews the inspection logs, and tightens the discipline chain of fear. Is there a winner in this tension? Those who seem to have arrived at first are the ones who lose by the end of the 3rd month. Because the so-called war machine is a human machine as long as there are people in every part of it, fragile, tired, prone to error. That's why Ryazan is not just an industrial news story, it's a political X-ray. The shape and form of Putin's authority are revealed here. A leadership that takes credit for success and disappears in failure leaves institutions as mere window dressing. The administration does not follow its own decisions, but the shadow at the top. Thus, the so-called accident report serves more to protect careers that have not been blown up than to uncover the truth. If the word sabotage is uttered, the security apparatus takes center stage. Officials swallow it as an example case. Both paths render the question why invisible. That is why the statements in this video are not propaganda from the opposing side. They are the collective wisdom seeping into the images we are watching. An order is only as strong as its ability to carry the truth. So what does this mean for Ukraine? The answer lies in the modest but effective lines of the front lines. The fluctuations in artillery fire rates and accuracy seen in recent months cannot be explained solely by counter-battery pressure. Imbalances in the quality of gunpowder and charges, fires in warehouses, disruptions in the supply chain, all of these factors accumulate and manifest in what you call the fire plan. At the same time, strikes targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure, railway stations and refineries are also aimed at disrupting Russian internal logistics, particularly the supply of fuel and explosives. As this disruption intensifies, the cost must be borne on the ground, thereby multiplying the likelihood of risk and accidents. When you consider Ryazan, Lipetsk and Taganrog together, the big picture becomes clearer. In the second year of the war, Russia sought to achieve rapid scaling by integrating the military industry with the civilian industry. The result, security layers were removed from civilian facilities, education was reduced to mere signing off, and standards were replaced with "it's done." The phrase "manage it" worked for a while. Now it's back as a chain of unmanageable failures, fires and explosions. This internal explosion, as it collides with external blows from Ukraine, is not only hitting the arsenal, but also the regime's legitimacy. Is all this just a series of unfortunate events? Might be a sentence Putin would like to hear. But luck speaks the language of statistics. The same facility catching fire twice in a decade pushes the limits of statistics. As long as reports detailing the technical malfunction are not made public, there will be no society left to say, "Explain with patience." Russia's own people, its own industry, its own workers are demanding answers for these explosions. In a town, in an apartment block, at a cafe table, the question, "Why didn't my son make it out alive?" is etched into the wood. Now let's step into the Kremlin's consultation room for a moment. On the table are 2 files, accidents and sabotage. Both have notes written in red pen. Confidential. Increase social media monitoring. Classify the investigation as confidential. And a small sentence, a state of mourning has been declared. This style of management does not change the outcome. Because a state survives not by multiplying files that cannot produce decisions, but by relying on the truth. It is not just the paint that is drying on the walls of Ryazan, but a question that is not drying. Whose life will the next shift explode? Answering this question with "there was no enemy attack" does not inspire confidence. The real answer lies within the industry, written in the sweat beneath the helmets. Either you restore safety, or the workers won't return. The smell of war isn't only felt at the front lines, it's also present in the factory's drying rooms, raw material warehouses, and shipping hangars. Everyone who works with explosives knows, the smallest oversight can turn into the most expensive excuse. This wave in Russia shows where the excuses end. When the pressure to produce more is accompanied by the order to stop less, gunpowder betrays gunpowder. I do not use the word betrayal lightly, because in Putin's own rhetoric, this outcome must be described with that very word. The war machine is betraying its own people. The worst betrayal is not that of the enemy, but that of one's own. This has 2 effects in the big picture. First, it undermines the message of deterrence sent to the outside world, because for the number of tanks, the accuracy of missiles, and the length of the front line to have any meaning, there must be a reliable, measured, and disciplined supply and maintenance network behind them. If you lose that, the numbers become meaningless. Second, it weakens the chain of loyalty within the ranks. When a worker starts saying, "My life is more valuable than your war," authority begins to crumble not only in military decisions, but also in the rhythm of the production line. I won't rush to answer the question, where is this leading? But I can say this, every new explosion chips away a little more at Moscow's myth of endless ammunition. The fire in Ryazan didn't just burn down a facility, it burned down the arrogant tone of, "We can do it." This arrogance may still echo in television studios, but there is a new voice resonating in the factory. Stop. Check. Don't send. These three commands may seem like the final lines of a regime film. For now, they are just subtitles. But subtitles change the meaning of a film. The irony of history is sometimes the color of flames. For years, the Kremlin said, "We will withstand sanctions, diversify production, mobilize the civilian industry." It mobilized, but mobilization devoured security. What is burning today in Ryazan, yesterday in Taganrog, and before that in Voronezh, is not just the chemicals in the warehouse, it is the strategy itself. We have the right to ask, if you are so strong, why have the factories become your enemies? The answer lies with the Kremlin, but the silent response from those working on the ground is clear. We are not enemies, but we cannot survive at this pace. The spinning world reminds us of an unchanging truth. Wars are won through production. Production survives through security. This is the lesson left behind in the ashes of Ryazan. The fate of a gunpowder factory can resemble the fate of an army. Big words don't tighten small valves. Big screens don't activate small sensors. We need people who know their job, and do it without fear. Today in Russia, fear has replaced skill. Fear has stolen from security. Security has stolen from life. And when life is gone, the war machine stops working. One final reminder. The Kremlin is skilled at declaring mourning, but mourning does not repair the future. To repair, one must first admit the mistake. To admit the mistake, one must first hear the truth. If you silence the truth, you cannot silence the explosion. Ryazan said it. What is needed to avoid hearing the same story tomorrow in another city is clear. But for this regime, that clarity is the greatest danger. Because clarity means responsibility. And responsibility disrupts comfort. Yes, these explosions are not small enough to be dismissed as accidents or simple enough to be labeled sabotage. There is a truth that transcends both. The nerve endings of a regime, an industry, Putin, are burning. The truth will wait on the other side of the door. Without security, there is no future. The flames in Ryazan have written this. For those who can read it, what is falling is not just a wall, it is an idol. This gunpowder factory tells us much more than the collapse of the economic and military machinery fueling the front lines. Here, the people's trust in Putin's authority is eroding rapidly from within. Thank you for watching.